Parisha, an ancient text interpreter and tablet reader, will be hosting this weekly event. She'll be joined by associate speakers from the LCF HD each session. So join us on Mondays at 5:30 Pacific Time as we complete the book, and it will be on our YouTube channel, Learning Center for Human Development. And check out our blog at emeraldtabletstudies.com. We will schedule to have anyone that has further studies to join us on the session and share your knowledge. Join us as we read and discuss over the next few weeks the mysteries of time before time. There are many researchers who say this is a source of our religious scriptures and written by God Himself. Come with us on this journey of discovery. Now here is our host, Parisha.
Welcome to the Emerald Tablets call. Grandmother is quite busy doing grandmother stuff, as we all know, and she does. And so it's important for us to keep going, and what she's asked me to do is to kind of moderate the call this evening. So I hope people can hear me. If you can't, start waving your hands or jumping up and down or something so that I'll know that you can't hear me. Otherwise, I'm going to assume you can. We're going to be talking today about, well, the book, obviously, the Emerald Tablets by Billy Carson, but we're specifically going to be looking at chapter 7. And this chapter deals with the tablet number 5. And I got to admit, when I read through this, it was like, wow, this stuff is pretty amazing. When he starts talking about how Atlantis was destroyed and how he escaped with all the knowledge and has hidden it away for us to find. I felt like Indiana Jones, kind of like reading this. And I'd love to create a kind of time here where we can just share and see what some other people got out of this, because like I said, I'm still blown away trying to figure out how I can absorb more of this. But I'd love to hear how some other people felt and what insights you got, and specifically from where, what actually hit you. And if there's anybody who would like to give us a benefit of some of your thoughts or some of the things that might have struck you in this chapter. I think the way we're going to do this is if you go to the screen and just raise your hand, we'll know that you've got your hand up, and then hopefully somebody can unmute you and we can talk. So if you've got anything that you would like to talk about, I got to admit, the thing that hit me was that all this really heavy stuff was going on in Atlantis, and in the meantime, the dweller was walking around among them and saw all of the craziness that they were trying to do. And as a result of that, set in motion forces that caused the destruction of Atlantis. Specifically, if you look at the bottom of page 104, and sort of continuing on to the page 105, he says, "But in his temple, all-seeing the dweller lay in his agwanti, while through Atlantis his soul roamed free." So obviously we're talking about him moving around in an avatar based on what we've talked about before. "Saw he the Atlanteans by their magic opening the gateway that would bring to earth a great woe." So obviously they were messing with things that were not for them to mess with. And in fact, a little bit earlier than that, he talks about how they were going into places of forbidden knowledge. And so then he says, "Fast fled he his soul back to his body. Up he arose from his agwanti. Called he the 3 mighty messengers, gave the command that shattered the world. Deep neath earth's crust to the halls of Amenti swiftly descended the dweller. Called he then on the powers the 7 lords wielded, changed the earth's balance." So this is pretty heavy stuff. I don't know about how anybody else looks at this, but I'm looking at this going, my God, these people were actually able to like shift the balance of the earth just because somebody else was doing something they weren't supposed to do, and in order to get them straight, they were able to wield that kind of power. This is pretty heavy. To me, this gets me excited. I get keen about this stuff. And then he says, down sank Atlantis beneath the dark waves, shattered the gateway that they had opened, that had been opened, shattered the doorway that led down below. So to me, now this all starts to make sense. Why was Atlantis, if they were so, I always wondered, how come if Atlantis is so advanced and everything, they didn't know that this was coming, whatever it was that hit them. And now I'm starting to understand, okay, there was somebody who wielded an even bigger stick that was keeping them in place. So anyway, that's the part that I got to admit, when I first read this, it took me aback a while and I had to kind of digest it. But it actually clarifies a bunch of things that I've also heard over time. Like, why did Atlantis suddenly fall victim to whatever this calamity was? So any thoughts? Anybody else got anything else you'd like to bring up or talk about? Veronica, are you waving at me?
Okay. One of the things that struck me about this chapter right off is how they talk about who Toth's teacher was, which was really kind of interesting. They call him Master. Let me get to that page.
I think it's page 103, Veronica, but you're on.
The creator of the world. What?
He said 103.
The teacher of Thoth, who was Master Horlet, me into questioning the fact that Horlet out creating from a crystal and all its vibration, everything that a crystal does. And then I thought about the fact that I relate to being rock that talks. And relating to being rock that talks, I asked the question that I had never asked before: are there crystals in the body? And I honestly know. And in researching that this week, I learned how there are a gajillion crystals in the body. As a matter of fact, the very fact that we can stand upright has everything to do with the crystals and the bone structure. And I didn't know that. And really ticked in, well, you know, here's crystals in the body, here's rock that talks, and here's Master Orlet, who's talking about the creation through crystal and all of that vibration. And I truly came out with a lot more questions, but I came closer to a lot more answers, as we've all been, you know, certainly psychology this past few months and how that all interacts, as well as the Emerald Tablets. It helped me put another piece together, just looking at what Master Orlet was about. And there's even on to a video where they actually say they're checking Master Orlet that you may want to check out or not. But it too, more questions for myself and more questions about the power of crystals and was Master Orlet truly, where did he come from and where did he powers from? So those are the kind of questions at the beginning of the chapter.
Wow, thank you. I think if you ask anybody who ever had a kidney stone, they'd probably tell you there are crystals in your body.
Yes, I relate to that.
I saw Singing Pines had her hand up. Did you have a question, Mare? Or a comment, sorry?
Well, it's an observation. When I, like you, Mike, I had to keep going back through and through to understand the flow of what was being said. And when I began to realize, I've had the benefit of reading a few different books about the Anunnaki, different creation stories, how the Anunnaki came. And what I began to realize is that we're talking about the Great Flood. The disaster that came, of course, is the Great Flood. And further with that, I began to realize, because I'm saying, okay, what is this Atlantis? Why do we keep focusing on Atlantis? Plato is right about Atlantis. And then there's a place here where it talks about Thoth creating the structure with all the chambers that vibrate and all those inner chambers that house different information. And I realized that's the pyramids. So I'm looking at and hearing that whatever was understood as Atlantis was what Aki first created as their port, their platforms, where they were in the space stations, etc., before the flood. And when I look at that, then a whole bunch of information makes more sense.
Okay, sorry, I was muted there for a sec. I see Robbie waving her hand viciously, so go for it, Robbie.
I I kind of had the same question that Veronica. Like, who the heck are these guys? You know, they're just like names thrown out. And I looked all over the internet and I couldn't find a lot of specifically those people who were the dwellers, you know, that temple. So I looked up a couple of their names, like the definition of their names, to see if that would give us any insights. For Master Horlet, they do this based on numerology. It said a person with that name is a very loving and caring individual with the tendency to put the needs of others before themselves. They're a very responsible and trustworthy type of person with a high regard for justice and equity. They're also very artistic, harmony and beauty. They have wisdom beyond their years. They have a deep understanding of life, even from early childhood. They're a natural healer and visionary. They possess a great deal of intelligence, sensitivity, and power. So that kind of, you know, gives us an idea of the character of this person, if it really was a person, an actual person, or if it was some other kind of being. Then I also looked up, it's spelled Ytolan, but it's pronounced Tolan. And the person with that kind of name also, the attributes that they have are beauty, very much like Horlet, harmony, perfection, family, love, responsibility. They're very highly idealistic. The person with that name is represented by the six-pointed star. I don't know what that's about. But basically, it's uniting the spiritual with the material. The person with that name is very empathetic, very compassionate, and they always try to be at the service of others and others. So in reading these things about these two different people, their names, I started to wonder if they just, you know, represent certain principles of the universe. Maybe they weren't actually, you know, physical teachers that taught stuff. Maybe they were, you know, some kind of energy form that embodied attributes. So anyway, I thought that was kind of cool, and I want to share that.
Hi, thank you, Robbie. I agree. To think that everybody that he's talking about has to be somebody that looks or even resembles us physically is probably not right. And I think you're really smart to say, hey, maybe these people that are beings that he's talking about, since they possess so much more intelligence and knowledge and wisdom, as he says, they probably have found a way to move around a whole lot more efficiently than being in a body, even though it's sort of fun. Mary, did you still have something you wanted to say, or did you have something else you wanted to say? Because her hand was up. And I noticed that Brooke had her hand up earlier. Brooke, did you want to say something? Okay, so can we unmute Brooke?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I was thinking that the Atlanteans might be the Anunnaki, possibly. Because in another book that I was reading, the Anunnaki Chronicles, they had come to Earth. They were advanced civilization as well, and they had come to Earth for supplies and resources. Need a civilization, and then a flood came and destroyed their civilization, so they needed to then rely on humans to help them. So I was wondering if possibly that maybe the Atlanteans that they speak of could have been the advanced Anunnaki too.
I think that's really a good observation. And it kind of, there's an old saying that says if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, maybe it's a duck. And I think you're putting together some pretty good evidence there and tying some things together that I think it certainly deserves consideration and thinking about. I think you could be onto something. It makes a lot of sense to me.
But there is something along with what Brooke is talking about, but what I was talking about as well. We still have, there is of the two brothers warring with each other, because in Atlantis you see that there are some that fell and that with wisdom, and that the ones that fell drag the humans into darkness, and that there are have to maintain a balance. That's on page 104. So, and part of that again, that's somewhere a memory of how the Anunnaki came, and there was a between the two brothers, the one Enki, who loved, created the humans and created them with abilities greater than the Anunnaki themselves, and the Enlils, who saw the humans as a threat and wanted to make them. Another instance in another book that I read, how during the flood, Enki, and I think a lot of information here, where some of what you see with the dweller is actually Enki, he took all the DNA records and people, and rather than leave in the airships humans behind, he actually retreated into a cave. So there's this reference here during the disaster that happened of the retreat in the cave. So I find that correlation pretty interesting too.
Yeah, I believe he says he took it into his spaceship. Yeah, he says on page 105, kind of the second paragraph from the bottom.
Correct. Yep.
He says, then gathered I the sons of Atlantis into the spaceship. I brought on my records, brought the records of sunken Atlantis. You wonder, is this like what really got the whole Noah story going? Was he saving the genome kind of thing? Is this guy like the original Noah?
Especially on chapter 106, where he says, I buried my spaceship, waiting the time when man might be free.
Yeah, he says he buried it under the Sphinx, it sounds to me.
Right.
Or am I out in left field here?
No, on 106, he continues to say, after he says, I buried my spaceship, waiting the time when I might be free. Over the spaceship erected a marker in the of a lion, yet like unto man. There neath the image rest, my spaceship forth to be brought when need shall arise.
Wow. Could be the Sphinx.
That's it? You're going to leave us hanging there? You're not going to...
Why not? A cliffhanger. I'm sure there are those who went to Egypt, perhaps could elaborate more.
Well, one of the story goes that a king was sleeping out in the desert, and a dream came to him and said, "Dig here," and that's when it was uncovered. And that is actually what happened. So it's understood that there's huge, much more that the sand is covering, and there's a lot more to reveal.
Mary, you broke up just as you said dig here, then you said dig here and I didn't hear the next part, so I'm missing the punchline. Help me out.
Dig here, and so they dig, and that's when the Sphinx was uncovered.
Ah, okay.
That's when the
Exactly.
Sphinx
This was discovered.
So there are more digs going on right now. That's a huge amount of sand. I have to document everything as they go. But everyone expects to find a lot more information as the sand is removed and more remains uncovered. This whole area was had waterways. The ships ran around the pyramid. The water was critical for the pyramid to run electricity and be a powerhouse. So yeah, there's lots of them. Lots to be discovered and uncovered.
There was a really good section on, I don't know if any of you watched, there's a program or a series called Ancient Aliens. You can see it on Netflix and a lot of the Discovery channels and that. And I love it. Claire and I watch it a lot. But they had a really good one about the Sphinx where the archaeologist was explaining how the Sphinx is way, way, way older than anybody thinks it is. And he's proving it with the way the water has eroded the sides of the channel where the Sphinx is. And for me, I thought that was pretty amazing. And still the archaeologists want to stick with their story that it was made by somebody a couple thousand years ago.
It's
Yeah.
whatever belief system can handle.
Talk louder, Mary. I don't hear you. You mumbled.
It's whatever anyone's belief system can actually handle.
Yeah. So what else? Anybody else got any comments about this chapter? Talk to me about what you think he means on page 107 when he says, "Use thou the key of the seven, and open to thee the pathway will fall." Does anybody have any thoughts about that? Marianne Love? Can we unmute Marianne? Okay, you're good.
You can hear me good. Well, from the numerology studies we're doing, we know that the seven involves the mind, philosophy, just really understanding our reality through getting into the exploration of everything that's consciousness. And so if you take that, then that the seven means that, then the key is through the mind, not unlike Buddhism. The key is through evolving. And so then the pathway will fall. So we'll get awareness or enlightenment, full awareness, and unto thee will be given the wisdom and the way. So that's how I take that passage.
He talks a lot in this chapter about how we have to get into that whole point of being able to get out of our body and into flow with cosmic consciousness. So that makes a lot of sense to me, what you're saying.
And he talks on the earlier page, 100, page 100. Let me see. Out of the ether, he called into substance, molded and formed by the power of Jolan. I don't know how to say that. Into the forms he built with his mind. I think that's again referring to what we're now understanding in physics is the ability to create through going into the blackness and, using the principle of downward causation to actually build our 3D reality through the use of our mind. And so in these tablets are like the keys that unlock our reality and our freedom. And it's nice when you see it all merge with the sciences we're looking at.
Okay, Mary, we're going to come back to you. I think Nikisi Weya had a point she wanted to make.
Yes. To who are the seven? Unlock, use thou the key of the seven, and open to thee the pathway will fall. The other thing that came to mind for me was back on page 81, where he talks about, are they the lords of Amente, overlords, they of the children of morning. Call them 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 8, and 9 are the titles of the masters of men. So that talks about the seven. That's what came to mind for me. And the of Osiris, there were 7 tombs in what I remember. I looked up. That's all.
Yes, and Jim P. was talking about it at that time, said that the 7 are real, 7 who are here. And when I look at the key of wisdom, 100, he said that when Atlantis first grew as a power, one with the key of wisdom. Again, I saw that that's possibly a reference again to the station that the Anunnaki had first built before the flood. And the one key of wisdom is Enki. And then the one that forward in Egypt, that was brought forward, was Grandfather Enki. They're handing off, so it's like he's the key. And us humans.
Oh, very good. Interesting. Geraldine, I think you had something you might want to say.
Yes, so I guess it's similar to what Marianne was saying as well, and I was listening to the other commentary too, in that there's one part that stood out for me was when it says, each to the other, this is on page 106, each to the other is the keystone, each the gateway that leads into life. Follow the key I leave behind, seek the doorway to life shall be thine. And then it says seek in the pyramid. But, you know, all preceding that, there's very clear information that says freedom comes from knowing you're not the body. And so I went back as well, you know, in terms of who are the 7. And it's that position where you could be both. So there is, the physicality that a form takes because there's information which embodies that particular energy, that particular numerology, and brings it into the physical presence, because again in the previous chapter it also says how just by having the thoughts and bringing those down, it brings about, you know, solid matter. So we've got downward causation being talked about straight from Thoth here, and then that information again, that to be free, which seems to be the key that's also being spoken about, is to know we're not the body and that we are made of the stars and the oneness. And I think in this chapter where he says, you know, it's through all the keystones coming together. So to know that we're not separate, that's how I read this as well. That yes, there is different energies, but each to the other is the keystone. So each one of us is the keystone to the other. None of us do it by ourselves. That's my reading in this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Very interesting. Veronica, are you?
Yeah. The other thought that I had in reading that particular passage was how I also looked up that scientists are now making point where they actually can create matter from light, which is a theory they have been working on for years, but now somewhere in Europe, they're at this break where they're actually creating that experiment, if you will, or if you will, of matter and antimatter, but through light. They have found to induce and harness enough light to create something. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And getting back to something that Mary as well as Mike, in terms of the water around the pyramid, that led me to think about how the water goes around the cells and purifies in our bodies, you know. And so when we're talking about this structure, we're that physical structure in that sense. You know, we're made exactly the same way. We fire the same way. And getting back to what Geraldine just shared, just realizing we create, like I said last week, and the last thing that it says on this page, the esoteric in tablet 5 is that the only way out is in. About how I've come to a place where I now can to see or perceive how it's from the inside out, meaning the same way Toph and Master Perlat taught, creating from the ethers. You know, we create from the ethers, our own minds with our own thoughts. So that's what I wanted to share, because that's what it triggered.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, well, I really had a lot of fun. That article that Billy lists at the top of 101 is an article 6 years ago. So that in itself is pretty interesting. And they were taking information from, I think, was it 1913 there, where it was thought that light could create, but they never thought they would be able to do the experiment. Well, the interesting thing is that at this time of writing had not been done yet, but they had done enough research in other areas to realize that what they were researching, the formula, applied to the light creating matter. And the really interesting thing is that it's because of the use of gold. So I kept going and looking a little different because I thought gold. That's why the Anunnaki came to our solar system. And I'm thinking, and all this reference in this tablet about the sun, and the dialogue between the sun and the earth is what creates that we see. It's the friction. So they, around that time, 2006, they were researching nanoparticles because gold is a heavy duty storage ability. So, and they're using the gold for holography and a lot of the technology that's now being in all that the funny thing is, it's all that shimmer paint that's being used on satellites, different things. So gold is an that helps us hold our hologram together. Gold holds the earth and the beauty and the uniqueness of it together, and he needed to repair Nibiru because they were not able to. They needed the gold, and that's because it's an incredible data storer, and that data is the tetrahedron, the information. So the way that this keeps going in circles back to the and of course, what's under the Sphinx's paw is the tetrahedron. I had fun.
It's interesting when you say that because it brings me back to the emergence theory. And if you remember from what they talked about there, that's basically the original building block of all the everything that is, whatever they call the universe, I guess, in their theory, is a tetrahedron. So that's pretty interesting. The other thing that since nobody else has their hand up, I thought I'd share, Veronica, because you kind of, I'm sorry, wait a second. Before I go on with this, I see that Callahoo's waving at me feverishly. So go ahead, Mark. Can we?
Okay, I unmuted. Okay, I was listening to what everybody had to say, And Mary, you went back to the tetrahedron, which I have a difficult with, so if I mispronounce it, apology. And then I heard, you know, we're speaking on the crystals and everything. And the tetrahedron, if whoever was on the call, if you remember, grandmother said, when I proposed the question, is that why life is considered from the get-go with the Native American indigenous people, whereas we wait for like a year to celebrate a birthday? And she had described, she said, you cannot see it, but in an ultrasound, they did the ultrasound, she said it looks like a crystal, that forms a crystal in there. And yes, the body does have crystals, but so does Mother Earth. So like when I go to lay my body down on Mother Earth to balance myself, I feel that Mother Earth, the crystals in Mother Earth, realign my crystals in my body and that's what balances me out. And so it's very much, our body also, Mary, carries gold, we carry silver, we carry all the elements of Mother Earth, this body here. When you get into Use Thou Key of the Seven, and I did sneak a little peek on the numerology book that you all are studying, that mine looks tattered and beaten, but the seven, you know, born under the seven, they would put them into becoming priests or priestess because they had allegedly wisdom. But the use of the key of the seven, the rainbow is also seven. There's 7 colors to the rainbow. And if you're getting into talking about color or things of that nature, because color therapy actually, from any studies that I've done, and it was years ago, so I could be incorrect, came from Atlantis. So are they saying the key of the seven, be it like a high priest, will help open the pathways, or is it one of the rays of the rainbow? Is it all 7 of the rays? Is it a crystal? It can be, in my mind, it could be any of these, but he definitely laid down the foundation of telling us these are the wisdom things. It's kind of like for us to figure out what they are.
Right, that was my question, and you just expressed it in about 34 different other questions that are equally as interesting.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. Since we're talking of the 7, what I see also, the entire time he talks about his soul traveling, he's going into deep space, anywhere, he's free of his body. And that's how he gathers wisdom, a lot of it. Now, if you go on page 82, at the end, you see 7 is he who's Lord of the vastness, master of space, and the key of the times. So I think, like he says, the answer is to go in, and that's how you free yourself and you can travel. The vastness, the space, and the times, and collect some wisdom. To me, it's also an answer there. That's how I see it.
Cool. Any other thoughts? Anybody else have any other thoughts? So Veronica, I have to tell you, when you were talking a little earlier, you were talking about changing light into matter, and I was thinking about, you know, this big collider that they have in Switzerland that basically is doing that. And it made me realize, okay, so if matter is energy and energy is matter, if you were standing somewhere far away from the planet, each one of us would look like this little point of energy. And I was thinking how we talk about it being a fractal universe. Well, when you look from the macro, what do you see? A bunch of lights. As you come closer in, you see us, a bunch of lights. As you come inside our body, what do you see? Again, the same thing. It's just one of those things that all of a sudden, when you were talking, all these pieces kind of clicked together, and I went, okay, so we are just, all of this energy and crystallization in our body is just part of this fractal universe that starts huge and ends up microscopic. Anybody else have any crazy thoughts like mine? Come on, Anoli, what do you think? I'm going to start picking on people if you don't talk.
I have an idea.
Robbie wants to say something. Go ahead, Robbie.
Yes. And all of those little points of light, Mike, those are that are spinning. And Albert Einstein said that everything is vibration. Nothing is solid, so that depending on the speed at which the particles are spinning, we might see it as a solid or a gas. But sound is a vibration, and so are thoughts. And Albert Einstein also said, match the frequency, the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. Be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. You know, going back to what Carson says on the bottom of 100, where those guys were using vocal frequency and vibration, call a matter into existence. Whatever vibration that we are expressing, meaning whatever we're talking about, thinking about, to draw those experiences, and people, or we'll draw and people that match those vibrations. It's the old theory of like attracts. So whatever vibration we're putting out there is going to attract resonant vibrations. So those guys were just sitting there sending out vibes. Everything just materialized. So the hippies, it's all about the vibes, man.
Absolutely. Actually, sounds like Albert Einstein was the original purveyor of the law of attraction. As you were talking, I was thinking there's a place in here that I was trying to remember where I read it, where he talks about that again. Anybody else got any other thoughts? Callahoo has her hand up again, I think. Somebody told me. Callahoo, do you have your hand up again? No? Okay, sorry. I'm just catching up on my messages here as we talk. Oh, I know where it is. It's where Bill, on page 107, where Billy kind of gives a little blurb there of his own interpretation. And he says the only time, he basically says this esoteric message is the only way in is out is the way in. And I think several people have said that several different ways. We all must take the journey to inner space. And according to Toth, only when we can synchronize with the universal consciousness and break free from the illusion of the physical realm. I don't know if anybody else has ever had this experience, but sometimes when I meditate, I get this feeling that there is a sound behind, almost like a really, really low hum, almost like an ohm. And I feel like I'm hearing the universe. I don't know, maybe I've just been out in the sun too much, but I really think that the universe has this whole, not even the universe, bigger than the universe, because the universe to me is only what we know. The universe has, I laugh when I hear physicists say the universe is expanding. And I say, okay, well then what is it expanding into? So there has to be something bigger than the universe, which to me is all the blackness. But then again, that's just my opinion. But I believe it has a sound, and I think you can hear that sound. Anybody else have any other comments on what's in this chapter? Okay, I had something. Yeah, back on page 96. When Billy sort of starts to get into this whole path of wisdom thing, he says, "Know ye, old man," this is in the middle of page 96, "know ye, old man, that all space is ordered, only by order are ye one with the all. And it's like, as I read through this, I get this whole feeling of harmony. We have to somehow raise our vibration, or not maybe raise, but coordinate our vibration with the vibration of the universe in order to have this expansion happen. I don't know, that's the feeling that I have. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that, or thoughts on something else? Veronica?
It brings
Go ahead.
to mind how often GMP says to us that there is no randomness, that randomness isn't we want to be in an ordered, that there is a way, there is a, if I said it that way perhaps, that we can follow, as opposed to being randomly doing hit or miss, or sometimes and no and maybes. To eliminate all of that and just be real clear, real direct, real in sync with, as you would say, with the universe. That's all I want to say.
It's interesting what you say, Veronica, because you make me think again of fractals. And if you know anything about fractals, fractals are basically patterns that are made up by equations that mathematicians can't solve. But they found out if they graph the equations, they get all these beautiful patterns. And they can tell what the solution is. It's not random. It gives you these gorgeous patterns, as we've all seen. But if they look at the equation and try to solve it, it looks random and unsolvable to them. So it just underneath this layer of this equation that looks hidden is all this beautiful order in that randomness. As you were talking, that kind of popped in my head too again. Sorry, you're muted.
Keep
It goes back to something that you touched upon earlier when we about the fractals and the breakdown. Like in the outer form, there's this randomness, there's this field of energy. And then as the vast field of energy comes into causation, it molds itself, until, finally there is what this human is, this outcome that one was going for. But prior to, and even as I sit here, and we all sit wherever you are, we know cues do move. We know that there is no solidity in that sense. And yet we see ourselves as this solid body, or the solid walls inside of, or wherever we see the solidness at that moment of seeing the solidness, i.e. going from the outside, we seem to forget that solidness is many, many moving particles.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say, it touched upon that for me.
Thank you. Mickey, you wanted to say something, or you had something you wanted to share? Good, you're on.
Okay. I actually was going to kind of go back to when Thoth was talking about going inward. And I've actually been doing quite a bit of traveling lately, connecting in with some of the elders, or as sometimes I might call wisdom keepers of various tribes. And a lot of what a common theme is right now is going inward, collecting your inward, being in tune with your inward, finding strength in your inward. And I've just been looking at the parallels with Thoth and some of the other masters that have come since his time. More specifically, Saint Germain and the Violet Flame, and transmuting things, and a lot of what's going on with all the shenanigans on the planet, and a lot of the fear and anxiety that's just seems to keep growing exponentially. And there are some of us that are holding that space of comfort and So one elder in particular I was talking to last weekend about the story of Diganawida, the great law of peace. And I never realized as I've been doing more research, that they show him showing up circa 1490, and he is still around in the 1770s. And I just see a lot of parallels with him and Thoth, and what the local people saw in him as building faith and strength and peace. And so many of the youngers that I talk to have an affinity and a connectivity with Thoth, and it gives them comfort to follow through on all that that he embodies. And I'm feeling very blessed to be able to share with you all in the Emerald Tablets. And we're just inviting everyone to lay a blanket of peace across the territories. And this has been a common theme. And if we could share that together, I would be honored and very blessed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Mary Ann Love, I saw your hand up and then it went back down. Or did you want to say something, or did you forget what you were going to say?
Holly wanted to talk. Holly.
Who did?
Holly.
Holly did?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So can we?
Can you hear me?
Holly? Yeah, go ahead, Holly.
So I'm kind of wanted to go back to that page 96 where you were talking and following the paragraph down before Billy made his statements. He who would follow the pathway of wisdom, open must be he to the flower of life, extending his consciousness out of the darkness, flowing through time and space in the all. So for me, having had a near-death experience and gone to the light, it was just light for me. And it was the most comfortable place I've ever been. And as I look at the readings that we're doing here, and I'm feeling like, you know, when you connect them with the truth of that consciousness of light, there is such a feeling of synchronicity and such a feeling of peace with that you feel like you know everything, but there are no words for it. So as I'm looking at this and listening to this and having read this chapter today, this week, it feels like that's what we're being asked to do, to look at and to align with and follow that pathway into that consciousness that is in synchronicity with the whole cosmos. Because maybe that's why it looks so dark and heavy in so many ways right now, is because we're trying to find that synchronization and alignment with the light that we are. And those of us that sometimes don't have that alignment, it can be a dark world and it can be very misshapen. So I don't know, I just was wanting to express that.
Thank you. Very nice. Did someone, Calahoo, Margie. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Well, mine flashes says unmute, so I unmute myself. Mike, I heard you say about that the universe has music and sound and things like that, that you highly believe that. Do you remember back in 1988, the harmonic conversion? And I think—
I'm not that old. Me? Are you kidding?
I remember it. Let's put it this way. Coach G is 32 years old. She was a month old when we were down at the farm, okay? Anyhow, we are not old. We are becoming better versions of ourselves. And that's how I view it. But you're right as far as like there's music that holds, you know, everything is a vibration, so everything has sound. And because it has sound, there are people that can hear it. I remember running down to the farm, a whole bunch of us, for the 1988 conversion, harmonic conversion, hoping to hear the music of the universe. And I came home, and Anastasia's father said he had 2 hours of wonderful music. He's a musician. He said, "Did you hear that music?" I was like, "Did you?" You know, I mean, back in the day, I was a little more, but yes, there is sound. I agree with you. There is sound to everything. And the fifth plane is where we get our music from. It's where we go to get music, or the creation of music. At least that's what I've studied, that it should be the fifth plane. You know, we're coming up with more planets these days, so that plane may be boosted up a little bit. Who knows? But yeah, I do agree that everything is sound, light, and but yeah, I believe that's what the whole thing on the harmonic conversion was. That the harmony of conversion, and it came through sound and music.
It's even funny, I think back to that first Steven Spielberg movie. Remember the Close Encounters movie that they did? Do you remember how they communicated with the aliens was through sound? Remember they made the tones of music. So it's not the first time somebody thought of this. Mickey, go ahead. Can we unmute Mickey? Good. Oh. Mickey, can you talk? She's still muted. Now you.
I am. There we go. So I just wanted to add, I don't know if anybody's heard, but we do have a new and improved harmonic convergence happening July 5th through, I think, the 10th. And so it's Harmonic Convergence 2020. And also, too, I wanted to speak to my kind of growing up metaphysical and having a psychic mother. When I was in my teens, I remember saying that same thing, that I could feel like a humming in my ears or ringing in my ears. And she would say that it's spirit wanting to communicate with you. Just listen. And so I would listen. And it is. It's a definite phenomenon. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Geraldine had her hand up. Geraldine, can we unmute Geraldine? Ellaway?
Where is Kelly?
Bottom there.
There, done. Yes, it's following on from what Holly was saying too, and that there's, again, so many practices in the book directly from the quotes of Thoth. But it does say consciousness free is fused with the cosmic, one with the other, and law of the all. So I appreciate that sharing, Holly, too, because it's like you said, it doesn't need words. And all through here, Thoth is sort of saying, stop talking. You don't need to talk. Or it's, example on page 97, abstain from eating until we have conquered the desire for food. That is bondage of the soul. So there's quite a lot here in terms of knowing that we're not the body, which is, we've been told numerous times, but it's not going to cause us suffering to not identify ourselves as body. It's going to give us what Holly was saying. Consciousness free is fused with the cosmic, one with the order and law of all. And then there's a really nice part in the chapter that we're reading, I think it was around 115, where it's like, if you feel yourself, if you feel a particular emotion and tap into it, if it is of the darkness, yeah, here it is, it's 115. When unto thee comes a feeling, drawing thee nearer to the darker gate, examine thine heart and find if the feeling thou has come from within. If it has come from your own thoughts, banish them from the place of the mind. And then it goes through a series of exercises that you can do sending a wave of vibration. So again, we're talking about music, we're talking about vibration. I mean, it's not saying vibration is music, but when I see a wave of vibration, that's what comes to me, whether it be color or sound. It's an energy. So it's really clear then that these pages are all bringing each other together. If you're feeling darkness, here's a practice to do. So when you're trying to give up, so-called give up the bodily things to have that oneness of consciousness, Thoth also gives us a way to do it. So really everything's in the book. Yeah, 115, that's right. First paragraph. Master thou shalt and not be to the brothers of the night. So that's about not being that. Yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you. Thank you. I think NQ had her hand up a little before you started, yeah?
Yes,
Okay.
there we are. Back when about order and fractals, just when you get out and go to YouTube, and they have a video that shows you, it's like the longest string of fractal, and they've taken the calculation and made it visual, like you said. So at any point, if you stepped in, it might seem like disorder, but how the order repeats, and it's very beautiful. Just thought you might want to check it out and see how it keeps repeating. So it gives you an idea of how it zooms in and zooms in and zooms in, and you see the patterns repeating. It's very cool.
Yeah, there's several of those videos on YouTube, and they're really cool to watch because they show how the pattern starts to arise. You can also see sometimes, if any of you have seen the videos of the guys with the vibrating plates with the sand on it, that is also pretty cool because just by the different vibration, you can see physically what the vibration is actually producing, which is I think is pretty cool. Somebody else, anything you wanted to say? Any other comments? Margaret. You're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
I just have a question. What you and Nikki Seaway were talking about, what would, I would go to YouTube, but what would I click in to pull up something like that? Because I'm interested in looking at that.
Maybe fractal patterns. Nikki Seaway.
Okay.
I believe it was called the long fractal sequence, something like that.
Okay. Long fractal sequence or fractal patterns. Okay. Thank you.
How are we doing for any other comments? Anybody else like to say anything about this? There's so much in this chapter in terms of just how he continually seems to be telling you, go back inside, get in touch with the flow of the cosmic is kind of what I get out of all this. How are we doing? Good? Yeah, Nikki Seaway, did you want to say something?
So when we were talking about with us,
Go ahead.
when we were talking about sound, what again it triggered for myself music and how different tones and music look. You know, there's a drum beat that no matter what I'm telling you, you have to be not to have movement. When that drum beat starts to happen, there's tiredness to it. Or when you hear something so melodic, there's a softness to it that just raptures you out, you know, and each of them have a rhythm that we attune to, you know, thank God everybody don't like the same thing. And that there's truly a mosaic, you know, or there is a symphony. And some people like horns, and some people like drums, some people like strings, but there's something that resonates to us the moment you hear it. And it's even like, let's say what just came, cry for a mother, the moment she hears that sound, it's wet, it wants to eat, or it wants to get up. One way or the other, or there's a tone, and that mother knows that tone. Just like you raised, like I was raised, my mother could look at you, and there was a tone. To that tone, you knew to shut up. Don't go past another breath. So we all resonate to sounds. Even we know that the animals, the four-legged sounds, we are all about sound, movement, and vibration.
Yes.
I remember one time, this is a long time ago, when I was with grandmother one time, and she stopped and she said, listen. And we were all trying to figure out what it was we were supposed to hear. And she said, don't you hear the rainbow? And when we turned around, there was a beautiful rainbow behind us. And ever since then, I every time I feel it, I feel that sound, I turn around and there's a rainbow there. So if you believe it, it works. But rainbows make sound.
Oh.
Nikki Suet?
Similarly, I have observed when it's after sunset and it's dark and you look up in the sky, you can see how satellites that are tracking, catching the sun, so they're way up above the Earth's atmosphere, and they're still catching them go through the sky. So they're those stars that are moving on a certain pattern. And I remember one time just having a thing, and maybe that was the sound, to look up. Some level, either my aura was that big or I was hearing its frequency, and I felt look up, and there I saw a satellite. And obviously, I'm reading a book by Clive Cussler, and he's talking about in there about sound and frequency and how it's used as a way of a defense mechanism, is what they were looking at, to create a wall. And earlier in the book, Billy talked about how the military also working with that they are using sound, and I think it was called the fence or something like that, that it's sound frequency that creates a blocking wall that you want to move away from. So instead of using physical force to move people, it's like aiming this frequency of sound, and they just want to back away. So it's very exciting, all the sound, so connected obviously to intent and bringing things downward causation.
This is Deb, and there was a time years ago that I was attending a pro person that was doing giveaway, and I was rattling for him, and in his final moments, as he gave away, he expanded his wings and then fluttered back again, and I heard this whoosh, and it went, and it was actually spirit. It was the sound of spirit exiting its body. And years later, when I was in the room, mother passed, and I did not hear that same sound, but I experienced the same movement without the sound. It was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My sister, as some of you might know, was very involved in palliative care. And I can recall one time being there at the residence that she founded and talking to some of the nurses. And they told me every one of them has lots of stories of sitting with people as they pass and feeling and watching and hearing their spirits as they lift. So I don't think that I think if you listen, you hear. If you don't want to hear, you won't hear. But if you want to hear, I believe the sound is there. You just got to shut up and listen.